For the first time in 21 seasons, Brisbane have won the flag, ending a long period of doubt, not just internally from their fans, but the media and opposition supporters alike, who were really ready to name Brisbane as one of the better non-Premiership teams of all time, putting up impressive home and away numbers without getting the job done on Grand Final day. Similar to the Port Adelaide Football Club in 2004, they finally climbed the mountain. Ironically, Port Adelaide doing that against Brisbane. But we're here now, and post that grand final victory, Joe Daniher has retired. The 30-year-old has departed footy forever after some speculation that I think was kind of nonsense to talk about in that grand final week. Now, I'm not blaming Mitch Cleary, who went with it first, but it just seemed a little bit weird at the time. However, the question now has to be asked, because we've now had 4 premiers in the last 4 years who did not repeat the next season. We might be looking at reasons as why that would be the case for Brisbane, and the obvious statement arises: without Joe, can they win the flag? Well, it's more of a question, and that's what I'm going to answer in this video. Can Brisbane win the 2025 flag without Joe Daniher? If you like the video, click the like button, subscribe to join the Daz Talks Footy family. I would really appreciate that. So Joe, at 30 years old, hung up the boots with 204 games, 395 goals, and averaging 16 disposals in his last season. You'd think with maybe 3 more years of good footy ahead of him, he might have been able to put together another 140, 150 goals, and if he had have gone to that point, you're probably talking about a player who played 260 to 270 games and kicked 540 odd goals. What is absolutely incredible, and this is by no means disparaging Joe in any way, but Jason Dunstall played 269 games of AFL footy and would have kicked 2.5 times that amount if Joe had have kept going at 1,254. Genuinely bonkers if you think about it that way. However, what is going to be interesting moving forward is just how Joe's loss to Brisbane is going to be felt, how they can recover from it, who is under the most pressure to perform in his absence, and what Brisbane's game style is going to have to look like with him not there. This is kind of like the anti-Richmond of 2017, who only had Jack Riewoldt as your key position forward in their first grand final, and they then added to it with bringing in Tom Lynch, whereas Brisbane last year had Daniher, Logan Morris, and Eric Hipwood, and now you're taking the best one out of that bunch by a country mile and completely eliminating it. And it's going to be really interesting because Brisbane were able to cover injury so well last year. You think of Kai Lohmann, who got more regular game time with no Lincoln McCarthy. Even in the grand final, Darcy Fort replacing Oscar McInerney and halving the contest and even bettering Brodie Grundy. Dane Zorko had an All-Australian caliber season replacing Kitty Coleman off half-back. You think of Jack Payne, who was able to cover the Darcy Gardiner hole, although there is an argument to be made that Jack Payne is already the better defender, but still, they didn't feel the loss of Darcy Gardiner on field a massive amount, and others are added to that list as well. So Brisbane's season was, as we know, immaculate, finishing 5th on the ladder, 44 points down to the Giants in the semi-final, 25 points down against Geelong in the third quarter, and didn't look like losing 2.5 minutes into the second quarter of that grand final. However, it's what they're going to be able to do in 25 that is going to be so interesting, because Joe delivered 109 scoring shots last year with 7 score involvements and 6 marks. Now, you're not going to be able to find that in just one player next year, and we'll talk about the replacements a little bit later on, but you are going to need to find better, more efficient ways to score, because Brisbane across the board were just awesome last year, and we'll get to those numbers in just a tick. But what are Brisbane going to do? The caliber of player that they have lost is vast, considering that he was top 10 both in Brisbane's AFL player rankings, and of course he was top 10 in the best and fairest this year and last year, but he was the number 10 key forward in the competition according to AFL player rankings, and the number 2 forward behind Cam Rayner. I've got to be completely honest, and this is no disrespect to Cam, but Joe was the better forward this year. I know that medium forwards and mid forwards are judged a little bit differently on the AFL player rating scale, so think of that what you will. Joe was just the better forward for mine, and you can't really change my mind. And what was really interesting as well is that Joe, in the eyes of Brisbane's coaches, was actually better away from the Gabba. When you think about Brisbane in that 01, 02, 03, 04 period, especially leading into that 2001 season, were seen as the club that couldn't play away from home, especially in the 2000 season, where they won a lot of their Gabba games, barely won outside of Queensland, scraped into a final spot, and then were out. And then in 2001, you think of that infamous game against Carlton at Optus Oval at the time, or Princess Park, whatever you want to call it. They got absolutely hammered and went on a massive run, got the grand final win, and they were away. Joe kicked 35 goals in away games last year. Now, I understand that every final outside of the elimination final against Carlton was away from home, but still, you have got to deliver on the biggest of stages, and he did that. I don't want anyone to forget about the contribution that he made in the 23 final series either. In fact, he kicked 21 goals from his last 9 finals, and showing up in that kind of way is massive. And keeping in mind that his 24 grand final performance was strong as well, putting together 16 disposals, 12 score involvements, 8 marks, and 394 metres gained. He could have easily, in my opinion, kicked 5 or 6 goals, had to settle for less than that, but that is okay. His ability to not let Sydney intercept mark the ball, or even gain intercepts on the ground and get their game going, was a big reason that they won the game. It's why I also give a lot of credit to Logan Morris and Eric Hipwood throughout that game as well, but Joe was definitely the focal point of this forward line, as everyone can agree to. But he was also one of Brisbane's best in 23 as well, again having 16 disposals, 7 score involvements, 5 ground ball gets, and nearly an equal amount of metres gained, only the 4 more in 23. And for a guy who the media love to pot as inconsistent and not quite good enough and a tease and selfish and all of these kinds of things, it's really great to see those players break down those barriers. And look, I haven't gone back through every Brisbane video I've ever made, but I can confidently say that I have probably been one of those people that have thought if Joe gets it together, they're going to be fine. However, where I kind of differ from some media personalities is that I'm not trying to take credit for trying to get Joe to be more or less of something when he finally flourished. In that 23 period, if you didn't buy him as a good finals player, you don't have the right to turn around and go, see, I was right. As soon as he became consistent, he was going to be good. You're either on a player or you're off a player, and if you are so frustrated with them, all you can do is criticize, you're off them. I'm not letting you take credit for that. And even though Joe kicked 119 goals, 88 from his last 2 seasons, which doesn't exactly show the greatest goal-kicking accuracy, but there was something that he did, especially in 2024, that I found super interesting, especially at the back end of the year, and it's got to do with his set shot goal-kicking. So check this out. When you talk about players that are having a shot for goal, especially from not very far out, the worst thing that they can do is stab the ball and not get a lot of momentum. However, with Joe's run-up and the way that he contacts the footy, it's not actually his momentum moving forward that is interesting, it's actually the directionality of the ball. Look how high those kicks are going. They are clearing from not very far out a very high distance. And what this reminds me of a little bit is Travis Cloke from Collingwood, that when he tried to kick the ball 3/4 to post height, no matter what distance he was out from, he was a spectacular kick at goal. Right, you put Cloke 50 out on the boundary that doesn't favour the left footer and he would dob them. One of these left foot goal kickers that was kind of robbed of credit when Buddy was kicking them from Bay 26, Cloke was a good kick from that point. Now, psychologically, we can all agree that Cloke had the yips from that 25 to 45 metre zone, especially directly in front, and he just didn't seem like he kicked the ball high enough. He was trying to be a little bit too cute and finesse the ball through the sticks, and Joe was guilty of that as well. But as we saw, the higher he kicked the footy, the better the kicks looked. The GWS kick from before, tight on the boundary line, the directionality, the height he was able to get in that ball gave him less of a margin for error when it came to the connection off his foot. But because his momentum was so strong through the ball and his ability to get the ball upwards, he was guaranteeing himself kicking through the footy. He was never stabbing at it. Therefore, you are not going to get a lot wrong if the ball is coming off well. If your routine is solid and you are kicking through the footy, there are less reasons you are going to miss a shot at goal. Sometimes these things happen, but Joe was setting himself up for success, and those 2 set shots against the Giants late in that game is a big reason Brisbane was still alive heading into the prelim. And seriously, watch out for it. It's something that I've noticed with Jamara Ugle-Hagan as well. When he doesn't try to kick the ball very high, it doesn't look great. Aaron Norton was a little bit like this. Jared Roughhead, later in his career, that 2010 kind of period, well, halfway through his career, when he used to lean back, yes, that was a bit of a problem, but also his kicks were so shallow. They were getting half post, 2/3 height. Get that puppy 75%, 80% goalpost height. I don't care. If you're 6'6", kick that mother trucking ball as high as you can. Think of someone like Anthony or Severio Rocker, by the way. They were able to get great distance. We know that. The ball always went high. It always went far, but it always went high. Scotty Lucas was like this. Matthew Lloyd was like this. And lo and behold, so was Plugger. And I'm not suggesting everyone is going to become a perfect set shot goal kicker. Plugger missed some. Matty Lloyd went through the yips early in his career. Dunstall at the start of his career wasn't the best set shot goal kicker. But any advice that you want to get off a guy off YouTube is absolutely fine. But kick the ball high, guys. You don't have to try and kick it hard, but if you kick through the footy and aim for, again, 3/4 post height or goal post height, you are going to get better results. And there's no player that signified the kicking the crap out of the ball versus trying to get height than Hawthorn's Trent Crode, who used to just try to kick the cover off the footy every single time. That's a little bit different. But enough about Daz, the goal-kicking coach. Let's get back to the Joe stuff, and Brisbane, of course. Because the other thing that they are going to miss is the competition, being able to compete in the air. With Joe not there, there are effectively 4 replacements for him, some that have played, some that haven't for Brisbane. And let's touch on those now, them being Eric Hipwood, Logan Morris, Luke Lloyd, and Sam Day. Hipwood I'm going to cover mostly in the next little bit here. But let's start with Logan Morris, who got a really good taste of senior footy, who I'm a massive fan of, but he is now going from the number 3 key forward to the number 2, which is a big step up in matchup. You think of some of the competition's defenses out there, you are going from maybe a hybrid kind of defender to a certified centre-half back. He is still very young. Expecting him to take on 30 to 40 of Joe's goals would be genuinely ridiculous. We haven't seen anything from Luke Lloyd yet, but his aerobic capacity and his hands, he might become the Logan Morris of this year, next year. You never know. And if they want to bring some height in there, that is their prerogative. Sam Day, for me, is just purely insurance. I don't think Sam Day is going to be the guy that is going to be there if Brisbane are playing in significant finals. I'm sorry, I just can't. It's a bit like Chris Burgess. I just don't understand where we think these 40-odd goals are going to come from. But my big concern for Brisbane is going to be their ability to impact the contest when there is a contested situation, say at half forward, and you've just got to dump the ball in there for territory and hope. Eric Hipwood is not a great contested mark. That's not what he does. That's fine when Joe's there. But when you're kicking in hope and hoping the big guy can take a big mark, Brisbane are going to have to change their ways. Because Joe was doing this sort of stuff. And whether it's on the lead or a big pack mark, these need to go somewhere. Now, I'm not suggesting that someone or a multitude of players need to be taking all of these. The point, of course, is not letting the ball get intercept marked here. So you do need to be able to create a contest. But of course, I think most teams would agree that a set shot is still going to be a higher percentage than maybe a stoppage or a boundary throw-in inside your forward 50. Whilst, yes, I've highlighted the tall players that are going to be the substitutes for Joe, I am firmly looking at 2 players here that are going to need to impact the scoreboard in a much higher way. That being Zach Bailey and Cam Rayner, who are definitely going to need to get forward, not go through the midfield as much. Levi Ashcroft and Sam Marshall are there. Let them do it. These guys need to permanently be high half forwards who are hitting the scoreboard. Dylan Moore kicked 36 goals for the Hawks last year. Both of those boys would be hoping they are 30 plus next year. And if they are, Brisbane are well on their way. Because Brisbane's balance last year was unbelievable. They were second in the competition for inside 50 ground ball. They were second in the comp for marking inside 50, and they were second for marks around the ground on the lead. They were able to hit up at the ball carrier. When the ball got to ground, their smalls could go to work. The problem is that if that forward 50 ground ball regresses at any point next year, they're in trouble because they don't have the get out of jail free card of that marks inside 50 stat. I can almost guarantee you that Brisbane are not going to be a top 3 side next year for marks inside 50. If they are, I'll put my hand up and say I was wrong. And again, the marks on the lead stat is going to need to be relatively consistent as well, because guys like Morris, guys like Hipwood, even Bailey, Rayner, these hybrid kind of forwards are going to need to be able to hit up at the ball carrier as Brisbane attempt to continue their great ball movement and start to get more shots around the 30 to 50 mark. I highly suspect that Brisbane aren't going to be a massive team kicking them from, say, the top of the goal square or from some of the spots that you saw Joe kicking his goals from. After all, Brisbane's forward line, again, functioned beautifully last year. Third in the competition for scoring shots per inside 50. They were first for score launches all around the ground. And for offensive one-on-one wins, they were fourth. With Joe not there, what does that last number become? 7th? 8th? If it's mid-tier and you're giving the opposition more chances to either halve or win offensive one-on-one, well, for them it would be defensive one-on-one. Better teams in the competition, or good teams in the competition, I should say. There are no better teams. Good teams in the competition are going to be able to punish you on turnover. When you think of the top 8 teams in the competition, 6 of those 8 teams were top 10 last year for scoring from turnover, and 5 of the top 8 were top 11 for scoring from the defensive half. So if sides like Sydney, Port Adelaide, Geelong, GWS, Hawthorn, Bulldogs, Carlton, you even look at Collingwood, Freo, who were just outside the 8 last year, if any or a group of those clubs get better at scoring off turnover or from their defensive half, that could be a point of vulnerability for these Brisbane Lions, because their ball movement is going to be tested. Last year, they were 3rd for scoring from their defensive half, 3rd from scoring from their offensive half, and 4th in the competition for goals. Again, all of this will need to be at a relatively similar pace without Joe there in order to keep it going. You still need to get better as a reigning premier. Again, we have had 4 years of no repeating premiers. You even think of some of the hangovers out there. Bulldogs in 2017, Hawthorn in 2009, Adelaide in 1999, as just a couple of examples. They are definitely going to be the hunted for the entire season. Now, the man who is going to be under the most pressure throughout 2025 for Brisbane is undoubtedly going to be Kane Corns' favourite player, Eric Hipwood, who is averaging just under 1.5 goals a game throughout his 177 game career. Now, Eric has been known as a player who has come in and out of games. He did have a good month stretch there in the gather round period. I think he also kicked 6 against the Bulldogs a little bit later on in the season, not too far forward, but that was a really good win at Marvel Stadium. But again, where Eric worries me is going to be finals. Remember the statistic about Joe from earlier? He kicked 21 goals from his last 9 finals. Well, let me refer you to this stat where Eric Hipwood in the 22 finals kicked 9 goals from 3 games. In his last 7 finals across the last 2 seasons, he's kicked 5. That is going to be relatively not good if Brisbane are able to hoist that premiership one more time. And look, I don't want this to sound derogatory towards Brisbane fans. You deserve to be happy. Okay, one of my favourite subs, my man Capish, is a Brisbane man, and we love that. And I'm not saying or taking anything away from this flag, but as we hit the Christmas period and every club is looking to be better, there is an argument to be made that no good team in the competition from last year has a bigger glaring hole than Brisbane do, the size of Joe. How do they recover from that? Can they do it? I tell you this though, if they can do it and Brisbane win the flag in 25, not only will it be infinitely more impressive than this one, and this one was already one of the better since I've been watching footy, it would probably be the most impressive I've seen in nearly a decade. Brisbane of 2024, the Bulldogs of 2016, and I still think Richmond of 2017, given where they were in the home and away season, was one of the more underrated impressive ones as well. It'd be a hell of a story, but what I can't wait for is how this new-aged Brisbane team going into 2025 as the reigning Premier performs without one of their Premier stars. And if you're an anti-Joe Daniher person, you will not truly understand his value until we see their forward line early next year. You are trying to replace 109 scoring shots last year. That's hard to do without him. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe to join the Daz Talks Footy family. You, my friend, are an absolute legend. I hope you're enjoying your week. I am enjoying mine. Looking forward to a 3-day weekend. Go Daz, dominating. See ya.